Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host and moderator, and I'm also the creator of thechocolateLife.com. Today, we're going to be talking about the high cost of expensive cocoa. This is part two in a series. Part one was this past Tuesday. And if you want, you can go and find the links on thechocolateLife.com to that episode. Before we begin, I want to remind everybody that whether they're watching, whether YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, you can go into the comments or the live chat on YouTube and let me know where in the world you're connecting from. And if you have any questions or comments during the course of the hour, you can put them into the chat. I'll get the questions up on the screen and look to get them asked and answered. And as a matter of fact, let's just jump right into it. So this is the post for today's episode. You can go there, but here is the homepage of the Chocolate Life. And you can see that here's the previous episode, if you can see my cursor moving, and here's the current episode. And for every episode, I do create an individual post. And what you'll do is you'll find links where you can watch if you get this after the fact. They're archived there, an episode overview, and then links and commentary and things that are brought up during the course of the episode. And what I want to focus on for this episode today is the fact that on this past episode, this past Tuesday, there was a question that Juan Santelices, connecting from LinkedIn, and I have since learned that he works for Picari in the UK and Ireland, asked me this really interesting question. And I didn't have enough time to go and I think I didn't have enough time to give it a considered and thorough review during the course of the episode. And so I said, okay, Juan, I need to create a second episode where we can talk about this topic. And so I'm going to get to that. Right, during the course of the things. But what I did when I worked on this was I put together a couple of other questions that had come in, a couple of other comments that had come in from some other places, and I want to get them as I answer Juan's questions. And then what I also wanted to point out is that there's a thing about action points, and I'll get to them, and I'll be talking about those action points during the course of the episode. And if you have questions about any of this, again, go into the comments and let me know. LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, whatever it is that you're doing, please let me know, and I'll get to that. But the first thing I want to do is I want to start off with this point that Juan Gonzalez made. Juan is in Canada, and he has a business, Mabco, the Mexican Arabica bean company. So he's a cocoa trader as well as, or importer exporter, as well as working in coffee. And so he made this interesting point about where we are currently. And that is that one thing important now is everybody doesn't care about the farmers. Before it was like everybody was saving the farmer by paying better, but now everything has changed. Everyone's complaining about the prices. I see all the hypocrisy come out. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to make this point about hypocrisy. I think that hypocrisy is part of deliberately lying. Right. So I make a deliberate lie. And I think that's part of the definition of lie. You are deliberately telling a mistruth. You are representing something you know to be false as if it were the truth. So you are lying about it. Right. And that's different from being misinformed, or you're unaware, or any one of these other kinds of things. I can make a statement which is not true, not be aware that it is untrue. And I think that I'm not lying. Now, having said all this, I just, I want to point out that, I'm not a perfect actor here, right? There are representations that I have made to people over the course of my career, and I haven't been able to follow up on all of them. I'm not putting myself out as like, being a paragon of virtue or anything like that. I have, projects where, I have not worked as diligently as I might have, representations that I've made. And I need to own those things and acknowledge them and follow through on the commitments that I made. So I'm not trying to put myself out here as being any special point here. But I do want to point out that I did need to point out about, okay, this notion about hypocrisy, which is there's a difference about deliberately lying and telling a mistruth, knowing that that's what I'm doing, and then holding another statement which is contradicts that statement, and that's where the hypocrisy comes in. So that's where I think it is, as opposed to being misinformed or not fully informed. And I think that's the attitude that I might take towards people who work at fair trade and people who work in related kinds of organizations, which is, they buy into the mission of the organization. They're thinking about the mission of the organization. They may not have ground truth. They're accepting what it is that they're told. They're misinformed. They're not fully informed. They're making representations about what they believe to be the truth. They're not lying. And if they hold an alternative position, it's not hypocrisy, because they weren't lying in the first place. It just comes out of this being misinformed. And part of it is, my feeling is you should never attribute to malice that which can be attributed to ignorance. Right. So it's really, really important, I think, to talk about that as we're talking about these larger topics more broadly, writ large. Before we go, I really do want a quick shout out to Juan. Andres, hi everyone, wishing you a lovely weekend. Hope you're going to have a great weekend in the UK, here in Scotland, Edinburgh. If you're interested in my said micro social enterprise, represents Picari in the UK. Okay, so you represent Picari in the UK. You're not a Picari representative as an employee in the UK. It's a really, really good distinction. And Juan, I hope that I get to answer all of the questions that you post over the course of the rest of the episode. And if for any reason I don't, put a comment or ask another question if there's something that's not clear, and I will get to it. I promise. All right. So having addressed what it is that Juan had to say, what I want to do is I want to talk about, this is a post from Facebook, on Facebook, not from the episode, but from my posting about the episode. The links, I think this might have been in the group Well Tempered, but in any way. So Mark Giltonen is somebody that I've known for quite some time. He is one of the leaders of the Cocoa Research Lab at Penn State University. And I was there in 2015 with their Frontiers Cacao Science Symposium. So I know Mark. I've been corresponding with him for many years. His wife and co-head of the lab, Ciela Maximova, colleagues and friends. So Mark, when we talk about, what are we going to do about this, says how, so one of the questions he poses, or perhaps a response to this, is how do we give farmers technologies and supply to get high yields? Why fear GMOs that can help solve low yield problems? Why let middlemen get so much of the value share? And what I want to say, Mark, is right. I am not against using gene sequencing and our understanding of the genome to be able to put together new varieties of cocoa. And I think that anything that can be done to streamline the creation of new disease-resistant varieties is a great idea, right? Cacao is such a promiscuous plant. We don't know what would happen if we put GM organisms into the field. I'm not against the idea. And people may or may not know that Howard Yana Shapiro, who's a Mars Fellow, I don't know if he's currently a Mars Fellow, has suggested we just replace all the cocoa in West Africa with disease-resistant, high-yielding varieties, right? Let's replace, let's create a monoculture and just replace everything. And I think that one of the challenges, I would say, is, Mark, who's going to pay for this? I mean, the farmers aren't going to pay for this, right? Would Big Chocolate pay for this? I think they should be required to, if this is their solution to solving the problem, right? But certainly it's not the farmers who are going to have the resources. What happens? How do I go about replacing 1,000 trees on my farm in a way that will enable me to continue to earn money while I'm waiting for the new trees to become productive, right? Many of these farmers are aging populations. How are we going to give them access to labor that is paid properly in order to be able to replace all of the trees on their farm? So it's a really, really interesting question, right? Technology maybe a part of a solution, but is never the solution to the problem. Yeah, and having seen some of the things that Mark's lab has done, in terms of cloning, yeah, we could go and say, let's go take this variety, and in a lab, what we can do is we can produce millions of seedlings much more quickly and much more efficiently. They would be, in fact, genetically identical, and we could get these seedlings and then graft them. And there are ways to use technology to address some of the issues, but it doesn't address none of the technology and high yields and GMOs. None of those address the more important problem: is why do we let the middlemen get so much of the value share, right? The reason why middlemen get so much of the value share, right, is because that's the way it's been done for the last at least 50 years, if not 100 years, right? So the big chocolate companies maintain an arm's length arrangement between themselves and the farmers. And one reason why is plausible deniability, right? We can say that if there are any problems associated with what's going on in our supply chain in a foreign country, we don't buy directly from the farmers. So we have no responsibility whatsoever. And so Mark, right? I don't know that you're watching this, but what I would say to Mark is, let's solve that problem first. Why let middlemen get so much of the value share before we go to all of those other things? Because we need to find out where the money is going to come from in order to pay for it. Right? So really, really important. Let's not put the cart before the horse. Right? So having said that, another comment. This is from Francis Anatogu, who I believe I met in Nigeria when I was there in January for International Cocoa Diplomacy's International Cocoa and Chocolate Forum, I believe. And I may have met you in London as well last October. But anyway, never attribute to malice that which should be attributed to ignorance. Totally agree. Excuse me. I must also state, again, that the ignorance is doing a lot of damage, especially when the ignorant wield a lot of influence. So what I would say, right, is thank you very much for acknowledging the quote. It's not, it's a variation. I think the original quote is never attribute to malice that which can be attributed to stupidity. Which I think is the original one. I've just played with it. But I think that what's happening here is that larger actors, or what they're doing is they're manipulating the people who are ignorant. And it is in that manipulation where the influence is. I don't necessarily know that the ignorant have the influence, because left to their own devices, they wouldn't do anything, right? They'd just be ignorant. They wouldn't be paying attention. But it is actors that are going in and manipulating that influence that we need to pay attention to. So having done that, let's jump to a real quick question from Volker Lehmann. And I'm going to talk about Volker a little later as well. I may do it. Well, I'm not sure. But Volker says, hey, Clay, I believe cacao production will shift to other regions. We're already seeing this. So number one, where is the shortfall in production? Where is some of the shortfall in production in this harvest season? Where is it being made up? Why is it only 375,000 metric tons down, 10 to 11% as opposed to 18 to 20%, which is what forecasts might say? Is we're seeing Ecuador, like vault into being second largest producer in the world. And part of that is, I think, big chocolate and big cocoa over the course of the last half dozen years or so. It says, hey, we're heading into a real challenging situation. Let's go see where we can increase production outside of West Africa. And so there have been enormous investments by big chocolate outside of West Africa, in the Americas mostly, but also into Indonesia, Malaysia. We're seeing China come on. I mean, Vietnam went from nowhere to being the third largest producer of Robusta coffee in the world, in less than a generation, partly because the government invested in it heavily. And there is a real good chance that if the government of Vietnam or the government of China decided, hey, we want to take advantage of the chaos in the market, they could go and increase their investments internally, as well as looking for outside investments to make this happen. The challenge then is that everybody's going to go bye-bye West Africa. I know we've been manipulating you and we've been taking advantage of you. We've been unethical for the last 50 years, but you're no longer useful to us. We're going to go someplace else. Thank you, bye-bye. And we're going to let you clean up the mess. And I think that is a huge problem that needs to be thought about and needs to be addressed with this. But yeah, no, I've had a conversation with Volker about this. I was there twice. In 2010, Volker and I put together a program where we were going to start off with developing 500 hectares of cocoa producing land in a way that made sense, giving the farm economy what we knew about the farm economy, which Volker knows a good deal about, um, and then expand that to as much as 5,000 hectares. And we're going to have international investors in that. For people who have never been to a producing country and would love to go see what Bolivia is like, Volker and I are organizing a tour to Bolivia in January of 2025. If you want to be a part of that, become a member of the Chocolate Life and go into the comments on any post and say, "Hey, I'd like to be on the early mailing list to be there," and we'll let you know. But Bolivia, while Volker's original interest was in the wild cacao in the eastern Atenes and the Beni region near the Bolivian border. He has worked throughout the country. So in the Alto Beni, around Cochabamba, he's worked all over the country to increase the amount of cocoa that Bolivia produces. Bolivia is interesting. It's a landlocked nation. They don't have a port, so everything needs to go to Chile in order to leave the country, and most of the cocoa in the country goes to La Paz before it leaves the country. There's some really, really interesting logistical challenges in Bolivia, and these are just some of the things that, if you want to join us in January, we can go talk about. It's going to be really interesting because we're going to spend time in the Alto Beni as well as on the Hacienda de Tranquilidad. So you'll be able to see the farmed cacao as well as the wild cacao. And if we go there during season, you'll have an opportunity to go out with farming families and actually harvest cacao and see how it's done yourself. It's going to be a lot of fun and very, very interesting. So to Mark and Yuri at Blue Spruce Chocolates in Kittredge, Colorado, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us today. And then before I jump into another comment, what I want to do is, or a comment in today's live stream, what I want to do is I want to talk about something that Daniel McKenzie, who is in the UK, brought up last week. Says, do you envision any larger chocolate buyers, manufacturers, processors are going out of business due to the current cocoa market issues? And I want to reiterate, I think that what we can do is we can separate out the market into small, medium, and large companies. And I know that there is a breakdown for what small and medium mean, but in this particular case, I think that we're going to look at large companies as having sales of above $5 billion a year. We're going to have medium companies in the 5 billion to 500 million, right? And sales, and small companies under that 500 million. And if we're talking about craft chocolate, if we're talking about bean to bar chocolate, certainly most of these companies are like under 5 million a year, although there are some much, much larger ones depending upon how we put this together. And I think that what we need to also differentiate is that we have private companies and public companies. And so the stress on private actors versus public actors and actors in each of these three different segments has to do with access to capital. If I am a big publicly traded company, I have access to capital. I have, the ability to engage in sophisticated hedging strategies, not just in the cocoa markets, but other commodities that I work with, and to shift risk by focusing attention on different aspects of the confectionery market. But I'm probably also am doing foreign exchange hedging. And so I can, today I'm paying in dollars, tomorrow I'm paying in pounds, next week I'm going to pay in euros. And then I'm also hedging those strategies. So I can also do a lot of work that way. And I can make money even in a down market just by hedging properly. And if I look at very small companies, like most of the bean to bar companies, number one is they're not nearly as well capitalized. They don't have access to capital, and they don't have the ability to hedge risk. And so it is the companies that are smaller that do not have the access to capital or knowledge and awareness to hedge risk that are the ones that are going to be most highly vulnerable in this marketplace. Right. And we can just go look and see, where they are. We can go, yeah, this company is going to run into a problem. What worries me about this most, right? Bringing it back home, I'm in the United States, is that we have a company like Guittard, right, which is the oldest still family-owned chocolate manufacturing business in the United States. And I go take a look at what happened to Blommer a couple of years ago. What happened to Blommer? The current owners of the company, family members, decided we're not going to be able to retain control of the business. There's nobody in the family that wants to take the business on and maintain it. And so they sold to Fuji Oil. And within a couple of years, within 3 years or so, what Fuji Oil is doing is it's closing down the manufacturing plant in Chicago because it's just not profitable, in my opinion. I think that's why they've decided to close it down. They've decided by offshoring production, moving production somewhere else, they can lower costs. And it would be a real shame if the biggest and oldest, still family-owned chocolate manufacturing company in the United States was sold to a foreign actor or to a public company or to a hedge fund, and then all of a sudden, it was pulled apart, right? And production was moved. It would be a real shame. So, one of the things I think we need to do, Daniel, is we need to go and look at the UK and say, what companies are at risk, right, in this small, under 500 million in turnover every year, and what do we do in order to go about support them and make sure that if they are really important to the local economies of the towns that they're situated in, that we can do what is we can to make sure that we support them. I think that's really, really important, and that's what I would say there. What I want to do is jump to what it is that the people at Peace on Fifth, I don't know them, they're in Dayton, Ohio, here in the United States, who are speaking as a retailer and chocolate buyer. We combat the price and market changes and customer fear by including diversity of makers, fun inclusions to protect the customer involvement and curiosity. And I think that what I want to say here is absolutely correct, right? When the discussion is all about, oh my gosh, things are really, really expensive. The price has gone up, incredibly, right? Being able to engage in the conversations, and that's something I'm going to spend a lot of time on, the back half of this episode for the most part, is having those conversations is really, really important. That, yes, while a lot of people are freaking out, to Juan Gonzalez's point, and all they're doing is focusing on price, this represents an opportunity. Inflection point is the phrase that I used, where what we can do is we can take hold of the conversation and we can move it in a specific direction. Now, I had an email correspondence over the last 24 hours to somebody who is talking about, well, in Brazil, what we find like a big company like Cargill is, growing their investment in production, and we can't import cocoa because of the fear about importing diseases into Brazil. This has to do with the spread of escoba rabrucha, which is broom. I forget the Portuguese. That was the Spanish pronunciation. And in the 1980s, which devastated production there. And so, are the small chocolate makers in Brazil, are they going to find themselves in a position where, big chocolate is going to do everything they can to maintain the status quo? And the answer to that question is absolutely. Big chocolate is going to do everything they can to maintain the status quo. That as we come out the other side of this, assuming we do come out the other side of this, there is going to be no fundamental change to the system, right? But we're at a point where perhaps what we can do is we can wrest control, right? To some extent, and create a free future for the craft chocolate market, the specialty chocolate market. I prefer specialty going forward. And we do that by providing narratives, right, which explain to people what it is that's going on in the way that we want to explain it, right? And that there is consistency in those narratives as well. And that's something we don't have at the moment. And I'm going to talk about that a lot more. But to protect my customer involvement and curiosity is where I think that, I have to agree here. I mean, you are at the point of contact with a person who is giving you the money. And if they're buying the end product, they are providing all of the resources to do everything else, right? And so making sure that you protect their involvement and curiosity is incredibly incredibly important. Now, I'm sorry I did it again. I'm really excited. I'm really animated. And what happened is I moved my cursor and I stopped sharing my screen for a second. because I'm paying attention over here and I lose track of where my cursor is, and that's why it disappeared. So really, really important, and I wanted to be able to talk about that particular point. So before I finish all of these, I've gotten to every one of these ones here. Before I go back to Juan, Juan's point, I want to say hello to Elmer Pineda of Yohoa Chocolate in Honduras. So who's been a regular participant here. So Elmer, how are you today? And then also to get to Neil Barston from the UK. Good point there, Volker. South America is moving to become an even bigger player in the global market than ever, which is something you referenced earlier this week. Today, Callebaut announced a new future farmer scaled up cocoa initiative based on its Ecuador operations. Yeah, and that's something that I actually received an email from, but I had trouble opening the link from Barry Callebaut yesterday. It's not something I'm prepared to talk about today, but it is something I'm going to talk about in the future, which is has stated it would be used to inform its farming in West Africa. Right. I can't tell you how wrong I think that is. Right. If Barry Callebaut wants to do a future farming initiative to inform whatever is going on in West Africa, it should do it in West Africa. It should invest in West Africa, not Ecuador. I mean, what's really interesting to me about all of this, let me hide this for a second. What's really interesting to me about all of this, and yeah, let's hide all of it. What's really interesting to me about all of this, right? Focus on Ecuador and someplace else is it's Big Chocolate's admission is like, we know we created a problem, but they're not addressing the problem in the countries where the problem exists. And, investment in Ecuador at the moment, oh my gosh, it's one of the least politically stable regimes in South America at the moment. I mean, why are you doing it in Ecuador with all the violence that's going on? I mean, you have, it's like, like what's going on with Mexico and the embassy. And it's like all this kind of stuff. It's like, well, Ecuador, right? We tend to think of, Peru or Colombia and the violence there, or even Nicaragua. I mean, like Ecuador, and it's really, really interesting that's where. But Callebaut has done an enormous amount of investment in Ecuador over the last decade. I mean, since at least 2017, so several years before the introduction of Ruby. I mean, much of that work was done in Ecuador. Things with the Cabos Naturals line, with the Whole Fruit line, all that works in Ecuador. Not all of it, but a lot of it's in Ecuador. So, Callebaut has a huge investment in Ecuador, including a new warehouse facility on the Port of Guayaquil. It's really cool to know. Do you think this is something that can actually be achieved given the smallholder model that is the vast majority of the market? Absolutely not, right? Absolutely not, Neil. This is something that, big companies like Barry Callebaut that have, R&D budgets that are larger than the total income of most companies, right? There aren't a whole lot of other companies in the world. So there's almost nothing that they can do, that they do, which is going to be directly transformed. I mean, what I really want Barry Callebaut to do is to be able to, go to Terry Collingsworth of International Rights Advocates and say, we're going to fess up, right? And, we've been bad actors, and, we would like to do some sort of plea agreement where we accept responsibility for not living up to our voluntary commitments under the Harkin Engel Protocol in the last 20 years. And we're going to do everything we can to solve the problems we've done in West Africa. Anything having to do, just Neil, in my opinion, anything having to do with any one of these big actors, right, moving into another country, if it in any way diminishes their responsibility and them taking corporate responsibility, personal responsibility for their actions and making reparations, should be avoided at all costs, right? Just that's flat out no. It'd be wrong, right? Anyway, with that, Brent, you can tell I'm excited about this and I want to do this. So let's go back to what it is that Juan Andres talked about. So what about countries where there is no government regulation on cocoa farm gate price, right? So if we go look, for example, at Ghana and the cocoa bod, what we do is that there is the legally legislated price that cocoa, that the farmer must be paid at the farm gate, and then there is the market price. And speaking of which, where are things today? So let's go take a look. Cocoa futures. Man, 11,200 is the spot price, the cash price for today. Hit 12,000 is where people expect for next month. But what's interesting is that we're seeing this differential between the cash price today and the futures price hover, somewhere around 5,000, 4,000, 4,000, 5,000 a metric ton. So the differential is still the same. By the way, any number past even July of 24 is going to be dependent on the mid-harvest. If the mid-harvest sucks, then you can just watch all these prices, after July just go through the ceiling. But what we see is, since, where were we on Tuesday? No, this Tuesday was a Sunday price, so 10,800. The price has gone up. So, by the way, I put a lot of the links from Tuesday's episode into this episode if you wanted to go there, and without having to go to the other episode. So, Juan, all right. What about countries where there is no government regulation? So the real question becomes, who pockets the difference between the farm gate price and the market price? So in this particular case, I don't think COCOBOD pockets all of it, right? There are licensed buying companies, and the licensed buying companies who are the people who are essentially exporting it. So it's the last company in the chain. Sorry, everyone, we're still running into pollen season here in Arizona. That's where I think the money is going. But there have been apologists, excusagists, right, if you'd like to put it that way, who said, well, there's all this money. Now farmers will be able to invest it in their farms. The problem is, in most markets, the farmers are not actually, they're getting some increment of it. They're not actually getting anything like the full differential between what it was a year ago and what it is today. So would you say then that this increase is going to be translated to more income for farmers on direct trade relationships between chocolatiers and farmers? Right. So, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, what effect would this have on fine chocolate makers and smaller chocolatiers? So this is where I sort of want to get into, let me find my cursor. Excuse me, where we get into the action points and preparing United's response, because I think it's really, really important. But before I do that, let's take a time out. We're about halfway through today's episode of Pod Save Chocolate. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm your host. I'm the creator and moderator of thechocolatelife.com. If wherever you're watching today, YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, go into the live chat, go into the comments, let me know where you're connecting from. And if you have a question, if you have a question or a comment, then put it in the live chat, put it in the comments, and I will get it up on the screen and ask and answer. And so, Elmer Pineda, who is from Honduras, saying the middleman is getting that differential. And you're speaking about the experience in Honduras. One of the things is there are more than 65 countries in the world where cocoa is produced. And so there are local differences which need to be accommodated depending upon the route the cocoa takes from the farm to the point of export. So, but for the most part, it is not the farmer who's getting it. The market is driven in part by speculation. Now, some of it is pure speculation in the sense that hedge fund and investors who have no connection with manufacturing, right, or processing, are getting involved and going, here's an opportunity to make money. We talked about an oil trader on Tuesday who's seeing this as an opportunity, who thinks that the market is going to go to 20,000 before it goes down. And so they're invested in this because, they're getting 60% returns, right, in the month of March. And like, whoa, if you can do that, why would I do something else? So there are some pure speculators. Part of this also has to do with big chocolate and big cocoa. What they're doing is they're hedging. I mean, they might have been rather timid in their 2023 purchases because of uncertainty associated with the EUDR. And so they pushed off decision making, and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, the price is insane. I need to go start buying, which shortens stocks and pushes up prices. And, they're hedging. There's speculation on that is not just pure speculation as well, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on a rant right now about direct trade, right? But before I do that, hey, we've got a comment. I want to say hello to Kelly Wassel from Little Rock, Arkansas. Thanks for joining us today. I think this is the first time I've seen you participate. It's really excited. I'm interested to know, how the rise in price of cocoa and chocolate has affected your business in Little Rock. And then Juan says, most of us know that if big companies do what you are saying, it is completely wrong. But how do you see that we all can help so it doesn't happen? All right, so I'm going to go into that. Is it going to happen anyway? And will they repeat the abuses in other regions of the world without any consequences? And the answer is, to the latter question, yes, Juan, if they're not held to account, if they're not held accountable for their inability to own up to their contributions to what happened in West Africa when they go into another country, unless the government of that country, right, actively holds their feet to the fire, then they're going to try to engage in exactly the same activities because they are allowed to. And that's a mistake. We are at an inflection point here, right? The dynamic, we have the opportunity to change the dynamic. I'll talk about that a little bit. And, there's some people who said, okay, yeah, if not now, when, right? Which is something that was thrown at me recently. I agree with you. If not now, we're losing a golden opportunity, but what's the plan? Do we have any plan whatsoever to do this? And I think I got one, which is what I'm going to talk about here. So Elmer says, I see a difference in fermented, non-fermented. It is finally worth all the work. Harvesting and drying pods used to be a waste of time and resources. Yeah, no, completely. There is that issue. I mean, one of the things about in Mexico, I mean, most of the cacao that is produced is called cacao lavado. So it's just, cocoa which is pulled out of the pod. The pulp is literally washed off of it and it's dried, and it's sold on the local market. And that price has always been artificially high. Excuse me, my phone rang, and I'm dealing with it. And so there are peculiarities of the local market that need to be factored in. In Mexico, because the local market price was so high, there was no interest whatsoever in fermenting because you couldn't make enough money to make it worthwhile. And so really, 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 really important to understand what was the local market. What you're finding, Elmer, in Honduras is, finally there's a difference and you can make more by selling fermented cacao. Absolutely. That's a great thing. Right. But before I get to Neil's, I'm just acknowledging, Neil, that I see your comment here. What I want to do is I want to make this particular point. Right. And I'm going to start off by telling a story. So I had my entrepreneurial epiphany in 1994 when I realized there were no professional chocolate critics. And it was that epiphany that said, started me on my chocolate life. And then 7 years later, in 2001, I put out my shingle on the internet with chocophile.com and became a professional chocolate critic, an industry observer, and consultant. Right. And by that time, 2001, I had been working for 2 or 3 years with Pierrick Chouard at Vintage Chocolates in New Jersey. I had been selling Michel Cluzel and Domori, high-end brands, into Michelin-starred restaurants in New York City and things like that. So, but it wasn't until 2003, right, when I made my first trip to a producing company for cocoa, right, that I was able to get this firsthand experience. And I've described it as like, I was, basically faking it, right, until I went to the farm. And I flew into Quito. I'm having to negotiate Quito, get to the Café Cultura, which is where we're all staying, spend a day sightseeing around Quito, seeing what's going on, then getting in this small plane, flying east into the Amazon, past Cotopaxi, which is, steaming. That was a lovely, lovely experience. Arriving in this little town called Coca, called Shell. I'm sorry. It was Coca in the Napo. Then getting on a canoe, motorized canoe, and heading up the Napo River, down the Napo River, to a place called Yachana. Douglas McMeekin, people may know that a name, and there I had a chance to, I met Dylan Bigelow, whose mother was Fran Bigelow, the founder of France Chocolate. John Kehoe, and then independent, had just come up with a trader, EDNF man, before he went to Cho, and is now at Guittard. All right. Some people from the Rainforest Alliance, Sabrina Vigilante. These are people, part of my formative introduction. And it wasn't until the next morning when, we got back on a canoe, went down the river, up the river, I forget which direction it flows. And then, from the beachhead, walked 2 kilometers inland, 2 kilometers inland, and it started raining. And the only thing I care about is like keeping my camera dry, right? I want to keep my camera dry because I want to document this. And so finally making it to where the farmer who is going to demonstrate harvesting, right? First time I'd ever seen it. Um, that's when I realized, number one is that all of this book learning that I had over the course of 7 years, it crystallized, right? And I had a sense for what it all meant and how hard the process was. And so I would say that if you think you have a direct trade relationship and you have never visited one of your farmers, you do not have a direct trade relationship. That the nature of direct trade is not, let's see how we can minimize the number of steps between me and the farm, right? Or, I pick up the phone or I call somebody or something like that, and, somehow the cocoa, management, and, not to put anything against Uncommon or Meridian or Downhire. If that's what you're doing, you do not have a direct trade relationship. If you have not been on the farm, if you have not looked your farmer in the eye and shaken their hands, right, and you haven't been there on more than one occasion, you do not have a direct trade relationship. I mean, if you want an example of great direct trade relationships, I would say that one of them would be Askinosie. I mean, Sean called. We corresponded in early 2005 about the University of Chocolate trip to Ecuador. In 2005, we met. I mean, I had a chance to spend a week with Sean in Ecuador and see his reaction to what it was that was going on, as his desire to move from one career to another career, as a lawyer into a chocolate maker. And I got to see what that meant to him, as he internalized all of the stuff that was going on and in the country, in Ecuador, and how he, over the course of the next several months as we corresponded, and when I had a chance to spend a week with him, both in Mexico, and so in the Choconosuro region of Chiapas, as well as in the Barlovento region of Venezuela on his first bean buying trip. I got a chance to see how he internalized everything that he was seeing, and then integrate it with his motivations for doing it. And if I go take a look at what Askinosie Chocolate has done since 2006, 2007, it's hard to find a company that small that has made such a huge difference in the life of the farming communities that he works with. And, all props to Sean, and I think this is one of the secrets to their success, is he goes and he visits his farmers every year. Part of his commitment is, I'm going to pay above market price when I purchase the cocoa, right? Right. But then I'm going to give you a 10% profit sharing check, and I'm going to come back and hand it to you. And then he says, oh, you're having trouble with, people going to school hungry. Let's say, can we find a way to finance a school lunch program? Right. Can we build a school? I mean, and he's taken those things and he's brought them into his community in Springfield, Missouri. His connection to a homeless shelter down the street, his connection to Drury University, his connection to this chocolate university program where he takes high school students and they go to Tanzania and that is direct trade, right? That is direct trade, right? Um, and so the question is, are you committed to a direct trade relationship? And I think it's really, really important to understand what is going on. And so Juan, if I go take a look at what, so I've known Santiago Peralta, who's one of the founders of Pacari, probably known him since like 2008 or 2009, somewhere in that range. I don't know exactly when Pacari was founded, and Santiago came from an unusual background, but what he's doing is he is traveling internationally all the time, and he's taking everything that he knows about international markets and bringing them back into Ecuador, and he's using them to make Pacari, the products that they're producing, relevant into the marketplace. And I think that's really important. I think about that relationship and, things that we might put together. And I would say, people may not understand that when Craig Sams was involved in the Toledo Cacao Growers Association down in Punta Gorda in Belize, right, with the idea of, taking that cocoa, and it was the first fair trade and organic certified co-op in the world, I believe, cocoa co-op in the world, and they were just using this cocoa in one of their products, Maya Gold. One of the things that Craig knew is that I need to make a profit. in order to be able to support all those things, right? So, and he had a full-time employee, Gregor Hargrove, who unfortunately passed away. But when he sold it to Kraft was not willing to continue that commitment in Punta Gorda. I mean, when Anita Roddick was thinking about, oh my gosh, what do I do in cocoa in West Africa, right? She said, I could have supported this co-op, Coapa Coco, but is that enough? No, I'm going to create Divine Chocolate, and I'm going to make sure that Coapa Coco is a partner in Divine Chocolate, and there's a profit sharing arrangement there. And so there are lots of different models for how these direct trade relationships work together. Just Heather Terry, I mean, Good Sam Foods. I've known Heather, since before her days as a co-founder of Nibmore. So we're going back to 2008 in New York City. I was in Colombia with her and her team in 2022 for about a week. And, irrespective of what you might think about whatever Casa Lucre is and does in Colombia, like most things, there are people who think they're great. There are people who say they're a big company and they exert undue market force. But, what Heather goes and visits on a regular basis. I mean, they're putting, is it macadamia nuts? In Kenya, I think it is. I mean, Heather is there. I mean, she's going and visiting the farmers. I mean, through the work that I did, visiting the Salon del Cacao y Chocolate and going on La Ruta del Cacao when I was in Lima for the festivals there in 2013, 14, 15, and 17. I know what it's like to go into a farming community and to have the organizers in the case of Peru, it was TechnoServe, and having people come up to us and talk about what great work is being done, and it being performative, and I gotta hand it, when I would hand it to Heather and her team, Saeed Abdallah, Sarah Galliano, people on the ground in Colombia, that when we walked into these places, the genuineness of the feelings which were exhibited between all of the parties involved said, yeah, that's direct trade. Now, is Heather happy with where things are? She's saying, are there ways that we can improve? Absolutely. And, I'm aware of some of the things that they're looking to do in order to be able to improve the relationships they have with their sourcing partners in Colombia, at least. And I'm guessing that she and Good Sam Foods, everybody's involved in it, is looking to do the same things wherever they are. And I think that's really, really, really important to consider. And there's actually a connection I want to make between the trip in Colombia and a trip that I had back to Peru, which is when we were in Necoclí, not Necoclí, the little town before we got to Necoclí, whose name escapes me. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little old. And I know that I said Craig Sams and his wife is Johanna, and I forget her last name. I don't want to overlook anybody. But I was involved in a presentation at a school, and the point was made by people in the group that this is something that never would have happened, 5 years ago. That there was such a pervasive fear of narcotics-related trafficking violence in the area that this kind of gathering would never have been able to happen. And again, irrespective of what you think of Luca or anybody else, I mean, the fact is that you've got this community and they're no longer living in fear is not something to be overlooked at all. And that's what I would say is, listen, the Peruvian cocoa industry that exists right now, exists because of USAID. They put a lot of money in over the course of a long time, right? And for the purposes of, convincing coca farmers to become cocoa farmers. Now, did they eradicate coca production in Peru? Absolutely not. It probably moved from one part of the country to another part of the country. But what did happen, and that's really important, and this is what we saw in and around Tarapoto when we were there, is that there are communities who no longer live in fear of narcotics-related violence, right? And so we find that long-term investment and mutual commitment, right, showing up, right, doing the things you say you're going to do, and that's going back to my comment earlier, is the key to this, right? That it's not, and I've had a long conversation with Lauren Stoddard, who still at USAID, but no longer involved in cocoa, but was, a person that I met at the Salon del Cacao y Chocolate in Lima in 2013, right, about what it meant to lead the investment in Peru and in cocoa sector in Peru, and get an idea about what that means. And I cannot go on and talk about this more, and talk about it more highly. We've got, Tim McCollum, who's one of the co-founders with Brett Beach at Madagascar, and currently Beyond Good. I mean, here are some people who were in Madagascar. They were, I believe, um, um, aid workers, right? And they saw a situation and they decided to take personal responsibility for it. Jeff Abella at Mocha Origins, similar kind of things. I mean, he was involved, the Peace Corps, in Cameroon, saw something, came back and said, he and his wife decided this is something I can fix. Right. And so created a company, Mocha Origins, and they're doing coffee and they're doing chocolate. And, they're taking tours of people to the farms, right, in Cameroon, so their customers can get an idea about what it is that's going on. So, um, so, right. So it's really important, again, to recognize that we have lots of really good examples, of direct trade relationships that work, right? So if you're a chocolate maker, you've never been to a farm, you're not going to your farmers on a regular basis, you need to do it. Otherwise, in my humble opinion, you don't have a direct trade relationship. A quick shout out to Simon Lester, who's connecting from LinkedIn. Peru is still very mixed. Many areas are different. To Tarapoto, it's an ongoing challenge. Absolutely. When I was there in 2017 in Ucayali, we had armed guards to escort around. So I was talking about, my specific experience in Tarapoto, 2017 in Ucayali. There has been not the same level of U.S. investment, of foreign investment in cocoa, my understanding, for the past decade, since at least 2015, 2016. And so, whatever gains that were made, right, there may have been some backsliding. And there, as I said, this moved around. And so certain areas of the country, right, became more susceptible than the areas where the investment was focused. So I don't want to say that it is a problem that has been solved. And when we think about Colombia, the work that Heather is doing within the small communities that Good Sam is involved with. I mean, the high price of cocoa right now is essentially suggesting to some cocoa farmers that they change, right? And that they start planting cocoa because they might make more money than making cocoa, which is pretty remarkable. But it is a problem that when you stop investing in the solution, right, the problem will come back. It's not something like we say, oh, we've eradicated the problem, it's gone forever. So we do need to worry about that. So I do want to talk about this action points, preparing united response and moving forward. I'm going to ask that everybody go to the Chocolate Life and read these in particular, so they get an idea. So I've got maybe 10 or 15 minutes here. I'm going to go talk about what I mean about them. What I am going to do is this coming Sunday is my monthly members AMA call. So if you're a member of the Chocolate Life, you want to spend 90 minutes right on a Sunday, we can get together and we can talk about anything you want. So I know that Mark at Blue Spruce has been one of the people who's taken the greatest advantage of this. And, he will ask me questions all over the map. Some of them are production questions, some of them are flavor questions, some of them are market questions, sourcing. We talk about a lot of things, and we do it on these monthly calls. But this coming Sunday, what I want to do is I want to invite anybody who's watching this to go and join us on that call. And here is the link. It's Google meeting, starts at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, where I am in Arizona. We'll run for at least 90 minutes. You can join at any time. And I want the focus, although it's an AMA, I want the focus to be on the topics that are associated with what's going on here. Because here's what I want to point out, right? And this is the point that I want to leave everybody with today. When we talk about action plans and moving forwards, and the question is, what's going to happen, right? Juan Andres says, are they just going to repeat the issues? What goes on? All that kind of stuff. There might be 5,000 craft chocolate, bean to bar chocolate makers in the world today. And I'm just going to, just for the rough math, I'm going to say maybe they have a million in sales on average. I mean, that's probably high, but it just makes the math easy. And so what it says is that's 5 billion in sales, right? Which is not inconsiderable. So even if that number is 2,500, right? And, we're talking about, that's still, 2.5 billion in sales, no matter how we play with the numbers, like 2.5 billion in sales, right? Right. If I had 1% of that, right, $25 million, right? That's enough money to be able to go and create the kind of marketing, right? Not only create, but distribute the kind of marketing which is necessary to change public minds, right? Now, one of the things I would do is that the fact that I don't know how many craft chocolate makers there are in the world, how many bean to bar chocolate makers there are in the world, right? That's a problem, right? The fact that we don't know how much cocoa they buy is a problem. We don't know how much chocolate they sell is a problem. And so one of the things that we want to be able to do is we want to be able to get to these people together, right? And to be able to find out how much economic value is this part of the industry worth, right? And then to be able to leverage the network, because in every producing country and consuming country in the world, I would guess there is now a craft chocolate maker, right? And so we are distributed across the globe. Now, it's really important to understand that, even if we're $1 billion, let's just say across all of these companies, and that's one of the estimates that there exists, that's 10 times more in sales than Tony's Chocolate Lonely, right? The craft chocolate industry, taken as a whole, is 10 to 25 times larger than Tony's Chocolate Lonely is. And wow, what has Tony's been able to do, right? And only hit that 100 million mark last year. What has Tony's been able to do? What has Tony's got, right? Number one, it's important to understand that they're called Tony's Choco Lonely and not Tony's Cocoa Lonely, right? They understand that in order to be able to meet the mission that they want, they got to have product they can sell. It's going to generate the revenues, which is going to support. But if I have $25 million, that's 25% of the annual sales of turnovers, Tony Chocolate Lonely. That's a huge marketing budget. We could do a lot globally, right, in order to be able to do that. It's also really, really important to understand that, Tony, so Mr. Beast's Feastables, is it about that same levels of sale, about 100 million in sales a year, something like that, right? Well, what do they have, right? Right. Well, number one, Mr. Beast's 200 million followers on YouTube, right? That's what Mr. Beast has. The craft chocolate movement, the bean to bar chocolate movement, doesn't have any of that. It has no coordination. And there have been associations and institutes that have been around for 5 years, for 15 years. And for one reason or another, they have not been able to address the problem, right? So they've not been able to figure out what to do. I think one of them is that they've adopted the word fine. Like nobody knows what the word fine is, right? And they put cocoa first, and I understand why you put cocoa first, but you need to focus on selling chocolate, right? And getting chocolate into the mouths of people who are going to be able to be influenced, right? In order to be able to grow the network and make change. That's where Tony's has been successful, right? They're not really selling chocolate. Chocolate is a means to achieve an end, ending illegal labor, child slave or slavery, not just child slavery in West Africa. That's what they're selling, right? That's what they're selling. They're not selling chocolate. Chocolate is just a means to an end. It's really, really important to understand that that's what's going on, right? And they are very, very focused, and they're very, very good at getting that message across, right? The reason why craft chocolate hasn't grown in the same way, hasn't been able to take off the same way, is because there's no message, right? Every single maker has their own message and are saying the same thing in slightly different ways. And you get somebody going, well, I walk into CVS and I see, oh my gosh, I see a Ghirardelli bar, and it says it's bean to bar, and it's only $4 for a 100-gram bar. Why am I going spending $12 for a 60-gram bar? And it's bean to bar. What's the difference, right? So there's no message, there's no counterpoint, there's no pushback, about what it is that goes on. And that's what the craft chocolate world needs over the course of the next couple of years in order to be able to, Juan, make a difference, right? And what I want to suggest is that that's where we go. That's what I want to engage every single chocolate maker in the world to move in that direction over the course of the next year. That's what we need. That's what we need to do in order to be able to make the difference that we can make, because we are bigger than Tony's, right? We are bigger than Mr. Beast, right? Right. It turns out that the Feastables line is entirely dependent. And I mentioned Lauren Stoddard and, CCN 51 production in Peru. And that's, what Mr. Beast is doing with his Feastables line. We are bigger than that. What do we lack? A single vision, right? A large community, because we are not organized. We don't know how many chocolate makers there are in the world. We don't know how much cocoa we buy. We don't know how much we sell. There's no coordination. And what I'm proposing, and this is something we can start talking about on Sunday in the meeting, is that kind of coordination. What I'm looking to do is put together a group of people, who are willing to commit 1% of turnover, right, to putting together an organization that is going to make this work, right? That we can put together the marketing materials and the message and the networking necessary to be able to speak as a unit. I don't know. As a unified, there may be some differences, but in a unified voice. I mean, I see the issues which are going on with the Associação being the Bar Brazil. I know, there are people who are members of that who are in the United States right now for the craft chocolate experience. But speaking of the craft chocolate experience, people are going to go there for 3 days, and then or 2 days or whatever it is, and they're going to leave, and there's going to be nothing until next year, right? There's no message, right? And so, what I want to suggest is that, we can do this, and we can leverage every existing organization that's out there, right? And we can say, we can help you communicate with everybody over the course of the year and do a better job together than we can individually. And that's where I think we need to go. No apologies, right? No excuses, right? No stunts, right? That what we're going to do is we're going to work together to make it happen. In a direct trade relationship, I think that one of the things that Sean Askinosie showed us in his book, A Meaningful Work, is he published in that book every single transaction that he had made with any one of his farmers up until the publication date, or the editorial date of the book. And I know that because he shared with me that information, so that I could look at it and go, well, people are going to ask you questions about X and Y and Z, and we need to make sure that we are presenting the information fairly, straightforwardly, and that we understand how the information might be interpreted or misinterpreted. We're going to move forward with all of those things. All right, and how do I know all of this? I was with Sean in Mexico. I was with Sean in Ecuador. I was with Sean in Venezuela. I sat down with him looking at these farmers, right, and trying to negotiate with them, right, and buy his stuff. I know where his heart is, right, and I know what it is that he has done over the course of the last decade. I know that it is possible. We have the success stories, right? We have the success stories, but we don't have any mechanism to communicate these success stories widely. And I think one of the challenges is, number one, bean to bar, right? Well, Big Chocolate is using bean to bar. What does it mean? People are confused, right? And that's just a process. It's nothing about intent. It's nothing about anything like that. That's what we're talking about, right? So we got, and then, speaking of Sean Askinosie, I know that there was a movement in around 2006, 2007. Sean was there. I think Alan McClure, Patrick, Art Pollard of Amano, probably Steve DeVries, were saying, we want to create the American Craft Chocolate Association, but they couldn't do it because they couldn't come up with, number one, is they couldn't agree on what a definition of craft meant, right? And they were worried about people going, well, people are going to say it's an American crap chocolate, right? So they were worried about how it might use. And this became really, really clear to me when I was in Albuquerque for the Southwest Chocolate and Coffee Fest, when I was having a conversation with somebody, and I'd say, you know what? I really like the use of the word specialty, because there's a lot of coffee, right? And I think that what we want to do is we want to move away from bean to bar, and we want to move away from bean to bar to craft to specialty, because it's been really successful, for the coffee industry. And, specialty chocolate is any chocolate made for specialty cocoa, just as specialty coffee is any coffee beverage made from specialty coffee beans, right? And the pushback I get from people was, well, what do you mean by specialty? Right. And I would talk about what I thought about specialty meant. And I go, well, that doesn't work. Right. And I say, well, let me address that objection. Well, that doesn't work. Right. And so what we can't do, right, and this is what happened with the American Craft Chocolate Association now almost 20 years ago, right, is we can't let the fact that we don't have a perfect definition keep us from starting, right? That we want to say, listen, we don't have a perfect definition for what specialty chocolate means, right? But we're going to start, right? And we know what the mission is. We know what we want to communicate, and we're going to come up with a workable definition for what specialty chocolate means. For example, we could start off with any cocoa that has won that is an heirloom cacao preservation fund designee. It's only 16 or thereabouts. But we've got any cocoa that has been awarded, entry into the final 50 of the Cocoa of Excellence since 2008. Yay! I mean, a couple hundred. We've got those, a special fermentation, and we might say that any cocoa that has been used to make a chocolate bar, which has won a gold medal at any international competition, is specialty cocoa. We can get into these things we want, but we can't not start because, well, I think bean to bar means you need to own all the equipment in your own factory. And no, you can't, just go to a producing country and make it work. Right. And then bring the liquor, back to the United States and finish it. That's not what bean to bar means. We're 25 years into this. We can't let those definitional arguments keep us from starting. Right. And this is what I want to do. I want to call on, and I'm going to start calling on all of the people I know. By the way, I own Specialty Chocolate and Cocoa Association. I know it's a mouthful. It's very, very long, but I own that. I own the .com and the .org. I'm happy to set it up. I don't know what the corporate structure needs to be, where we incorporated. Are we a 501c4? Are we a 501c3? Is it an S Corp? How are we doing it? I don't know the answer to that question, right? But I want to start. Right. And one of the ways you can help me start is becoming a premium member of the Chocolate Life at one of the two top tiers. And I'm asking anybody who wants to be part of Sunday's organizational call, and maybe there'll be nobody on it, but maybe I'm not going to let that stop me. But I want people to, help support this, and then to become a part of the conversation about how they are going to be a part of the solution to, okay, yes, we are in a moment that is an inflection point. Right, we're at an opportunity to perhaps investigate systemic change, and I want to be one of the people who is going to make it happen. Right. So, I know about the market research that needs to be done. I presented an idea for market research to one of the associations before COVID, and they said, well, we're not interested in finding a way to fund this. And I'm going, well, this is a way to grow your membership, by 10 times, and not interested. Right. So I presented to one of the largest chocolate companies in the world, and they said, that's not the way we use market research. That's not what we're about. The people you're talking about really aren't our customers. Right. And so we're not going to fund the research and understanding what's going on. I want to talk to you, the chocolate maker, right, who is concerned about this over the course of the next couple of years. This is an existential threat to some of your businesses. You're not well funded. You don't have money. Right. So, in the conversation that I had with Nick Davis of 11 Cacao in Jamaica a couple of years ago, now very early on in the Chocolate Life Live days, Nick was saying, why is it that all you people in the United States are saying, hey, you guys, in producing countries need to form cooperatives, right? Why aren't you, right, the people who are buying from us, forming cooperatives? And I think that, it's a really, really interesting idea. And, I've broached this conversation with people, and, what about in a cooperative structure with an investment component to it, you could own part of a cocoa farm that was just growing beans for butter. And you had contracts with somebody who would actually, on a tolling basis, right, produce butter for you. right? That's one way to hedge the risk of the price of cocoa butter becoming unmanageable for you over the course of the next couple of years, right? There are lots of things that can be done. It's just, it's the, you see, like, I'm so excited. It's the lack of organization, right? And it's the lack of organization, which is one of the reasons why this movement has not grown at the level that it could have and should have grown, because we're not communicating, right, with any kind of consistency, right? And I think that if over the course of the next year, right, what we can do, and I want to support the existing organizations. I want to support, right, professional organizations and trade organizations here in the United States, right, institutes here in the United States. Work with the people at International Cocoa Diplomacy out of the UK and Nigeria, support the work that they are doing. We now have the Associação Bean Bar España, right? And we have the Associação Bean Bar Brazil, and they're not communicating with each other, and they're not talking about the same messages. There are differences in the markets, I understand. And Spain is a producing country, or a consuming country, not a producing country. But you've got similar kinds of associations in Spain. There may be one in Italy. I know there's one in France, perhaps in Germany. But they're all they're not communicating with even a similar voice, let alone the same voice, making the same value proposition to do this. I want to create a little window decal that says, member specialty chocolate and cocoa association, and boom, put it on your window. And so people will know about this. And I want to be able to put, collateral material that you can put in your shop, so that if people have questions, they can go, yes, I want to know more about this. And you go, ooh, here we talk about it. And I want to make sure that, when there's a link, right, on every single member's website that says, let's go there and let's learn more about what it means to do this, right? How do we go and communicate in a similar kind of voice? So Nicholas Nicholas, I know from conversations in Brazil, and Nicholas, you and I, just for everybody, complete transparency, when I said that I've been corresponding with somebody in Brazil, Nicholas is one of the people I've been talking with in Brazil. We have created the Federation of Association to precisely communicate better. Absolutely. And I have spoken with Zelia Frangioni about that, right? And I think that, one of the things we talked about is, like, why bean to bar, right? Right, because it works in Brazil. You've been able to do a good job like that. But existentially, there's been communications saying we're worried about Cargill and what their investment in production means in the country. And we can't import cocoa, and we're almost at sort of break even where we're no longer an importing country. We can start exporting. 600 tons is not exporting a whole lot, according to the association. And you're worried about what happens with all of this and the wild cacao. I mean, what does it mean for people like Luis Abram and the work that she's doing, Arcelia Gallardo? I mean, you do have people like Rogerio Camé, who owns Fazenda Bonanza. You do have with his wife, Claudia Gamba. I want to make sure that I don't forget all these things. You have, Tuta Juliana Aquino, who are Baini chocolate, but they also have a farm in Bahia, whose name escapes me at the moment. There's no reason why you shouldn't be coordinating at that level to be able to solve some of your production problems, right? You got some farms. Let's figure out a way to find somebody to toll butter production for us, so we can have better control over what it is that goes on. And then how do we take those stories? How do we take the work and communicate them, leverage, right? Be better communicators about the work that Bruno Lasavicius is doing, using these really, really interesting cacaos and small varieties from Pará and places throughout Amazonas. Again, the work that Luis Abram is doing. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that can be done, right? And that needs to be done internationally to tell the story. So let people know that this is an international, this is a global movement, and there's value and understanding in doing it. And we want to put together. So yeah, the Associação Bean Bar Brazil, the makers that you've got, but there's so much more that can be done, right? And one of the things that I want this specialty chocolate and cocoa association to be able to do is to be able to help all of the organizations, so the independent organization in Brazil, the one in Spain, the one in France, all over the place, be better at doing what it is that they're doing and providing a common place, right? So a global website where this stuff can be done, right? So we can communicate the successes in really interesting ways and support each other. I mean, that's what I'm looking to do. It's not hugely important. And as I say, if I can get 1%, right, of what might be $2.5 billion, $25 million, right, right, we are larger in terms of the collective marketing resources that we, and this should be a part of your marketing budget and, part of your PR budget, right? To do this, and part of your sales budget, right? That what we can do is we can devote more in resources, right? Right, to be able to communicate our message collectively as a group, right? And this is not, naming names. This is not something that Chocoa does. This is not something that the Fine Chocolate Industry Association does. They are not doing it, right? And so I'm suggesting that we get together and we do it, right? That's what I want to suggest here. And am I going to do it all? No, I know the landscape. I can provide a vision. I want to be able to go and hire people who have this specific expertise. I'm not going to go create a viral TikTok campaign, but I want to find people who can. I'm not going to do the same thing, but I want to find people who can, right, and who do and are experienced at doing it, and to communicate the level of excitement, the level of commitment, the level of understanding, the level of urgency, right, needed in order to be able to address the problem. And that's what I'm reaching out to everybody today in doing this. So, final comment. Mike King at Encore Coffee in Kansas City, Missouri. One thing we have going in specialty coffee is a definition of specialty. It must meet a grading quality defined by the number of defects. It could be heifer, super helpful in specialty cacao. Mike, I don't disagree with you, right? But one of the things about the Q grading, and this is what you're talking about, is that there is an organoleptic component to it, right? Part of it is defects, but part of it is cupping, and we're going, yummy beans make yummy coffee. So there is that aspect of it. So one of the things that I would propose that the Specialty Chocolate and Coffee Association do, number one is I would go and take a look at the Cacao of Excellence program and say, this is a fabulous foundation. How do we go help them? I mean, there's never been an impact statement put together for either the Heirloom Cacao Preservation Fund or Cocoa of Excellence, Cacao of Excellence. How has winning an award, right, in Cacao of Excellence translated to better prices? Are you selling more? I mean, we could do an impact statement, right, and we could find out, right, what goes on. We could use their grading method for beans. We could start there. Maybe there's some things that we could also merge with what it is that the FCCI has been doing, right? But there's no coordination there to do it. Right? We could start off by saying, let's do a meta-analysis of all of the defect grading standards around the world. So what is the grading standard in Ecuador? What is it in Venezuela? What is it that are using in the commodities exchanges? Right? How do we create a meta-analysis that say, listen, from a defect perspective, you've got to have, here are the technical characteristics that you need to be even considered, right, for a technical specialty as opposed to a flavor specialty. You're right. I mean, but, right, did the specialty, it took a while for the Specialty Coffee Association to get to that. I mean, the Craft Brewing Association, it took them a long time to define what craft meant. And I don't want to go the way craft beer went, right? Which is, well, it's based on your craft if you don't have above a certain amount of beneficial ownership from a single large company involved in beer, I think that's, or spirits or something like that. And then you have to make less than 600,000 barrels a year, right? I don't want anything which talks about the size of production, the size of the business. Batch size is not about micro batch. It's not about whether you're producing in country or not, right? It's around something which is really, really simple to understand. Specialty coffee or specialty chocolate is made from specialty cocoa beans. Right? Now, I don't want to hold things up. I don't want to spend the next 3 years in this definition fight. This is what specialty cocoa is, and that isn't specialty cocoa. And we're not going to allow anybody who doesn't use specialty cocoa to play in our game. I don't want to spend the next 3 years in a definition war. What I want to do is I want to start off with a simple agreement. Specialty chocolate is made from specialty beans. We want to drive people to buy specialty chocolate. I don't care who sells it. I want people to buy specialty chocolate. I want them to start preferentially preferring, that's redundant. I want them to start preferentially purchasing specialty chocolate because they know that through the relationships that these specialty chocolate makers have with their farmers, right, that they are going to be able to be contributing to, right, making important systemic changes going forward. So, Juan and the rest, like, how do we keep big chocolate from doing, continuing, the shell game that they've been playing, right? By providing visibility, right? And saying to people who don't know otherwise, there's an alternative, right? That the chocolate that you purchase, right? The specialty chocolate that you purchase. Now, here's an interesting thing, right? If a big industrial chocolate maker, right, comes to and starts making a specialty cocoa or a specialty chocolate, according to our definition, we can say, and this is inclusive. I mean, Guittard, I mean, again, like the worst thing I can think of as a result of this, right? Going back to one of the questions was, what happens if, Guittard decides they need to sell out? I mean, the last big family-owned chocolate company in the United States, 160 some odd years old, but their largest customer is See's, and See's is owned by Warren Buffett, right? And so maybe there's an avenue to get some, significant dollars there, maybe a way to get to, the Gates Foundation, and to do these things. There are ways that collectively we can get to the resources that we need, but we're never going to get to the resources that we need to make the important changes that need to get made if we sit there and go, this is what craft chocolate is. This is what bean to bar is. We're not going to play. We can't afford, right, to engage in those kinds of definitional battles, which have kept the industry from moving forward over the course of the last 25 years. I mean, I would love, and that's that. And what I want to do is I just want to real quick shout out to the last comment, James Dufour. James, I'm not exactly certain where you're coming from, chocolate making novice. But one of the things is that we want to make the world a better place for you, right? For companies like you. We want to provide you with the resources that you can have, you can use, the tools, the communication methods that you can do to be able to communicate better about what it is you're doing and be more successful, right? Really, really important. And I said that was the last comment, and I was not being entirely. I've been, this has been sort of in the queue for quite some time from Neil Barston, who's editor, publisher of industry publication located in the UK. So thanks, Clay. Neil, my pleasure. Really interesting response here. I have to check out. Oh, he's gone because he's 8 hours ahead of me in the UK. But I enjoyed the points you raised. As for actual prices, I think the crop shortages right now will mean they'll be high for a while. It's probably going to come at the World Cocoa Conference next week. Absolutely. I mean, it will come up at the World Cocoa Conference next week, these high prices, right? But, this is the World Cocoa Foundation, or is it the ECHO meeting? I forget which one it is, right? But if you look at the World Cocoa Foundation, they're in it to support their members. And they're going to do everything they can to support the status quo and the bottom line of their members. ICCO is at a governmental level. They produce statistics, but if you're not actually a member, at the governmental level, getting at those statistics is really, really, really hard, right? If we take a look at, what gasoline does, the price of oil goes up, the price of gasoline goes way up, and as the price of oil goes way down, the price of gasoline trails. This is definitely going to be the case with cocoa, right? That there are people in this who are going to try to milk, for want of a better analogy, who are going to want to go and make sure that these prices stay up as high as they can for as long as they possibly can, because they are going to earn more in the market chaos than they possibly can. And by the way, when we think about, what the prices are, if I go to, again, really, really quickly share cocoa futures, and this number here, the main numbers will change. This is a live graph, so if the number changes, right? These prices, which go down over the course of the next year. So here's December 24, March of 25. We got all this kind of stuff. These prices are only doing this if the mid-harvest, which is coming up in West Africa, is anything like what has been forecast. If the mid-harvest is short, then these numbers are going to stay high, right? And it may be, as this oil trader hedge fund has said, they're expecting the market price to hit 20,000, right? Which is insane, right? When you think about it, but they already made 60% of their money, right, in 1 month, and which is pretty insane earnings when you think about it. Um, right? As long as this industry um, is speaking independently, as long as there is no collective voice, as long as there is no place where all of these good stories are collected, right, and can be communicated, as long as we can't really tell the stories about what it means for what it is that Sean Espinosi has done over the course of the last decade, what it is that Heather Terry and Good Sam Foods are doing, what it is that what the meaning of what it is that has been going on from Matacast to Beyond Good, with what it is that companies like Mocha Origins is doing, as long as we what it is that Volker Lehmann has been doing in Bolivia for 20 or more years, right? Individually, it becomes a challenge for us to tell those stories in ways that are compelling. Why is Tony's popular? I mean, collectively, it's a really tiny. I mean, the craft chocolate world, the specialty chocolate world, is much larger than that, and yet because we don't have a single voice, right, we can't communicate, and that's what I want to do, right? Right, to take advantage of the not to take advantage, but in recognizing that we are at an inflection point, that one of the things we can do is we can reflect this, deflect this, move this in a direction that is more um, more beneficial, right, in many ways to the specialty chocolate world over the course of the next couple of years, right? So that when we do come out the other side, specialty chocolate has a much better place at the table. It's much more recognized by more people for the value that it is bringing to the world. And that's what I want to do. And we can start this on Sunday. So if you go to thechocolatelife.com right now, let's go there. So thechocolatelife.com, here's the homepage. It's live. I'm logged in, but if you're not, there's a join button here. Join the Chocolate Life. There's always a free membership. And while you're at it, if you enjoyed the video, thumbs up on the video, like it. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe to the channel. Comment, share on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook, wherever you are. I will see them and I will respond to them. But join the Chocolate Life, become a member, share what it is we're doing. If you'd like to be a part of this Specialty Chocolate and Cocoa Association moving forward, there's an organizational meeting this coming Sunday. Starts at 10 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. It's a virtual meeting. It is on Google Meet. The link for that meeting is right here on the post for today's episode. You can go there, click on the link on Sunday morning, join us, and we can continue the discussion at whatever level you'd like to join in on the discussion. And yeah, so I just wanted to end on that note. I've been doing this since 2001, right? It's a long time. I've always been an observer of the industry. I'm not a maker for a very specific reason, although people ask me why I'm not doing it. And that's because, I think that that more voices like mine need to be encouraged, right? And to be given a platform, right, that will amplify what it is that we're trying to do, right? And that's where this Chocolate Life is a very different thing. I want to be able to, provide an organizing locus around which the Specialty Chocolate and Cocoa Association can form and grow and be the future of the specialty chocolate world, and make it the kind of community and the kind of world for chocolate and cocoa that we know it can always be. And we've known from the very beginning, because chocolate makes me happy, and because working with chocolate should be fun. And with that, if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back in the future episode of Pod Save Chocolate. And until then,